Welcome to the next episode of the CAPB Podcast. Absolutely honoured to have Rory Copinger-Symes, the founder and director of Commando Spirit, no less, as well as gin and others. So I'm a massive whiskey fan, as is Paul. So obviously we've got a bottle of it. But welcome, Rory. Thanks so much for giving your time up to come on the podcast.
Cheers, boys. Great pleasure.
So Rory, this is our first series of the podcast, and we've had people from RAF, the Navy, the Army, various arms of the Army, but you're our first Royal Marine. So yeah, go Royal Marines, and tell us a little bit about your distinguished military career.
Well, Matt, distinguished feels a little bit embarrassing, to be brutally honest, mate. I just stayed for a long time in the Royal Marines because I couldn't find the exit. I joined as an 18-year-old back in the 1980s, of all places. Yeah, I was in a Royal Marine CCF and watched the Falklands, and I came from an army background. Actually, my dad was born and bred army, and anyway, I joined in 1983. Initially for 4 years, and frankly, yeah, I just got lost. I kept on having fun, and people kept on giving me good jobs, and 37 and a half years later, I popped out at the end of it. So yeah, I mean, that's a distinguished career. It was all right. It wasn't bad. I went from a young lieutenant to a brigadier, so I can't complain, I suppose. And most people who know me will also point out that the last few years were spent in the sunshine. My last job was a bit of a sunshine one, based in Hawaii, working for the Americans. So I didn't do badly, mate. If it's distinguished as living in Hawaii, then that's distinguished.
That's one of those jobs that you don't really think exists. You know, when people say, "Oh, if you promote me and post me to Hawaii, I'll stay in." But yeah, that must have been amazing.
I genuinely, when I'd actually been in Portugal, I came back. I was working for the Commandant General as his chief of staff, and 3 months back in the UK, it was grey and horrible, and I was missing my surf. And I got this call saying, "Do you want promotion in Hawaii?" And I told the bloke at the other end, who was senior to me, to F off. I said, "We haven't got anybody in Hawaii," and he said, "No, because you're going to be the first bloke to do the job." So yeah, it was unbelievable. And for about 5 weeks, I genuinely thought it was a wind up. So I told the missus not to count her chickens, all the rest of it. So yeah, but we went out there for 3 and ended up doing 4 years, came back and retired. So it was an amazing finish to the end of the career.
But I'd say that must have been a tough sell. You know, Paul and I have both sort of like deployed all over the place, and when you posted over to Germany and trying to justify how good it is or not, getting a posting to Hawaii must have been a tough sell for the wife and the family.
Well, yeah, it is more of a sell, to be fair to the wife. It is literally the other side of the world, and we got 2 kids, or they're not kids now, they're grown up. But you know, at the time, it was more difficult to sell to her than it was, for instance, to me. But yeah, she was pretty good. She'd followed me for many years. She'd been through all the sort of Iraq, Afghan, et al. So actually, quite nice for her to get something at the end as well. But yeah, she was a little bit. That is literally the other side of the world, and you're going to deploy from there as well. I went, I don't know, because nobody's did the job at the moment. So it was a bit of work, but she eventually agreed, and I think retrospectively now is very happy that we spent fantastic 4 years there.
That's amazing. So, like you said, your career spans a fair few amount of years and a fair few amount of postings. So, at what point did the idea for the business come? Was it like did it side by side as you were serving, or did it as you left then said, right, what do I need to do now?
Paul, I'm going to give you a slightly longer answer. It's a great question, but it's not as simple as the idea of set the business up was definitely as I left, but the genesis of the business actually starts way back when I served in 4-5 Commando, which is based in Arbroath, Scotland. And those of you who don't know, there is a tradition that we think started in around the 1980s. Nobody's quite sure. In the officers' mess there, that when you leave the mess, you have to present a bottle of malt whiskey that the mess does not currently own. Okay, so roll that forward, and my time as a company commander up there, so around 2000, 99, 2000. And we had this huge selection of malt whiskies behind the bar. And some bright spark said, I think we've got a special collection here. Let's get the Scottish Whisky Association. So this guy came up and he did this analysis basically of all our whiskies. And he said, I think you've got the second largest private collection in all of Scotland. Of course, being bootnecks, we all went, well, who's number one then? And he said, Glen Eagles. So we went, okay, fair enough. But he then did a whiskey tasting for us, and that's where the blending idea really started with me. So he took us, introduced us. If those of you don't know about whiskey, there are distinct areas, 5 distinct areas in Scotland: Lowland, Highland, Speyside, etc. But at the end of this whiskey tasting, he had a 6th glass, and he said, right, I want you all to blend your own whiskey. And we literally took the 5 previous whiskies, and using those, we then blended our own little whiskey in a glass. And he gave us this little certificate that said we were master blenders for one day. And I've still got that, and it's on my wall above my bar. So long story, Paul, but that's where the sort of the idea of blending whiskey started. And roll forward 20 years, actually for my 53rd birthday, my wife had sourced this barrel, so a small barrel, about a litres worth of liquid goes in it. And on the front of it, she had engraved Rory's aged Commando Spirit, established 1965, year of my birth. And then a week later, she said, here's your second bite of the present. And it was a decanter with Commando Spirit engraved on the front, and 2 glasses with Commando Spirit. So the genesis, if you like, starts way before I'm actually retiring.
Yeah.
And then I'm retiring. And to be honest, it was COVID, it was lockdown. So I was just networking with, all I'd made a decision is I didn't want to go in the corporate world. And if I could avoid defence, I'd rather go somewhere else first. And I got a bit embarrassed when I was networking, and everybody kept on saying, well, what do you actually want to do? And eventually I came out with this, look, I've got this idea of Commando Spirit. Yeah. And the network, as you well know, and boom, about 3-4 months later and 3 pitches later, I set up a joint venture with a distillery in Scotland. And 9 months later, we had the first product on the market.
At that blending time, did you know at that point that there'd be something in it future, or was it just when it came to retire and you were like, actually, I quite like that, I remember that, and obviously whiskey throughout the years has been brilliant, maybe I could try my hand at that? Or did you feel that this is an idea back then?
Not at the original blending session then, but when my wife had given me the barrel, I had always been using just a simple decanter because I took the idea of blending. I like the idea of blending because quite often you might buy a whiskey you've never had before, or somebody gives you one sometimes, and you're like, that's okay. And then you end up with a bottle that's sort of half or a third, and then you've got several of these bottles. So I started doing blending at home, just a bit of fun. There's another story there, but I won't bore you with that because that's very drunken nights and all the rest of it. But once Amanda gave me this barrel, I then started literally, I had a vessel to blend, I had a decanter to put it into. And bear in mind that we was living in Hawaii with Americans. All my American buddies who are quite into whiskey as well kept on saying, well, can we taste the latest blend? So it became something during the latter years, if you like, that I then sort of went, right, have I got the balls to really try this in a commercial way? And yeah, there we go. We've done it now. We've put the bottle out. And I'm biased, but I think the blend's pretty good. Each to their own. Everybody's got their own personal taste. So
I can confirm. I can confirm it's pretty good.
Good.
I get. Yeah, I think it's banging. This is the second bottle I've had.
Good.
So yeah. What was I going to say? Was there a eureka moment when you were blending where you were like, by Jove, that I think I've got it. Like this, because you were toying around and playing, and you've done the core stuff.
I think, Matt, once you start blending, you start to realise that there's so many permutations You know, there are a lot of people who are very specific and they like malt whiskies and they only like certain things. And I'm a great believer in actually, depending on the situation, depends what whiskey I drink. You know, that sometimes I like a really peaty sort of Lafroig style whiskey, and other times it's a more Speyside-y, slightly sweeter, soft. You know, when we went for this particular product, part of my logic and something we've not talked about yet, but I want to make sure is clear is there's a big charitable piece to this project, therefore my slightly naive and maybe sounds a bit childish maybe, but I wanted a whiskey that was easy drinking. So I wanted young Marines, young soldiers, young sailors to be able to enjoy whiskey the way I had always done, because it was always seen as an old man's drink, if I'm brutally honest. Most people would say whiskey, yeah, old man's drink. And I'm like, well, it shouldn't be. If you enjoy, you know, a spirit, why not enjoy a whiskey? So no, there was no eureka on the specific blend there, Matt. And arguably the next version that I'm doing at the moment will be slightly different again. Not too different, don't worry. Hopefully you'll still like it, mate. I don't want to go too far from what we've created, but it was definitely work with me and the master blender. So you know, it's not just a single thing. In fact, even my wife is part of the tasting team, and she's not really a whiskey drinker. But again, because she's not a whiskey drinker, I wanted her to taste it and say, actually, yeah, that's acceptable. Wouldn't necessarily say she likes it, but she does drink it.
I think that there's a key thing. One of the key there that I pick up on is the legacy bit. So I've got two older sons. Both my oldest sons are serving, and when my sons turned 18, I had a single malt with them. My eldest son really liked it. He's 21 now, and he has his own little collection. So whenever he goes anywhere, he buys a whiskey. My interest in whiskey started. I was on an op tour in the Middle East, and we were supporting some different people in an embassy, and the embassy basically had to withdraw from the country, and they had a bit of a gathering before they withdrew, and they were giving away all their stuff. So I got this bottle of whiskey, and it was a Macallan Makers edition, like 18 years. Now I knew nothing about it, nothing, but I took this box of whiskey because it was nice, and it was free, and I was about 26 at the time, 27. And thought nothing of it, took it all the way back home, and then drank it. And I thought, oh my God, this is really nice. I really like it. This is really, really nice. So then I bought another bottle of whiskey, and I was like, why is that not as nice as that one I've just been drinking? And then I started to learn about it. Then I built up my collection, and now I love a single malt. I don't particularly drink anything else now, but I'll have a dram, a couple of things, special occasions.
Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
should never have drunk that bottle. You should have kept that because that's worth a lot of money now.
I found out it was worth quite a significant amount of money. I think it was around £600 when I drank it, which was quite frustrating because I could have done with it back then.
It's probably worth at least double that now.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
Definitely.
So you've now done the blending. You've now had this idea. What learnings have you taken, or have you taken any learnings from your military career and brought it into how you run your business? And what learnings have you found from running a business of this nature? Because it's not a normal, I would say, not a normal sort of area that people would venture into.
Yeah. I was thinking about this before, Paul, and it is quite a difficult question. I know it sounds like I'm trying to get out of it, but I'm not. Translating from firstly your first bit about military into the business. That's quite a hard one, but it's that people business. It's understanding people and trust. That's probably the biggest, as you guys well know. You know, we build trust through certain mechanisms, and it's more difficult to do that. I've found since I've left, because there's no, if you like, common denominator. You know, within the military, we all know what training we've been through. You know, you guys will give me shit as a Marine, I'll give you Army boys a hard time, but at least we know what we're referring to. That, as I stepped over, I expected to have, and I think that's probably a lesson. I probably built too much trust into people, whereas I didn't necessarily know that background, if you like. So I'm not sure it's necessarily transfer, but it's something I've learned in the intervening 3 years, I suppose, that you've got to really work on that a lot more than I anticipated. I think there was an element of sort of assumption that, hey, a nice guy is going to be a nice guy sort of thing. And actually you need to work pretty hard to build that trust. I think the business lessons are probably so numerous, mate, but money, counting the money, keeping tight on costs, that is absolutely, you're told that beforehand, but until you get into it, you don't realize actually how tight you need to be on it, and really keep on specifically when you're in a business like this where I'm sort of acquiring bits. 1 minute I'm buying bottles, next it's labels, then it's whiskey, that whole package comes with it, and then you've got to try and sell the thing, and margins and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So there's definitely a money side to it that I've had to learn, and I don't pretend that I've got it right yet either. Part of the reason I'm changing the business plan at the moment is partly because of that. So those are probably the two biggest issues I could probably come out with it in answer to your question. The military network, I have to say, and I should point out in this type of environment, is unbelievable. It was the network that enabled me to do what I'm doing. It's the network that, frankly, has supported my project. Not just veterans, but spouses of veterans and all the rest of it. That military network, which is ginormous. And I remember the distillery when we started, they said, "How big's the target audience?" And I said, "Oh, good question." So I had to go away and do some sums, and then right, how big is the Commando Brigade? Okay, how big is the Royal Marine Association? Just some figures. And then how many more people? So you never know actually how many there are, but you're into tens of thousands of people. But again, understanding what a target audience is, that again, I had to learn all of this stuff. And to be brutally honest, part of the purpose of the project is to teach me about business, because I'd had a great time in the military, but I didn't understand business. I'm still learning it, and I'm nearly 60, mate. So there's a lot to learn, and there's no way you get it all right. So I'm fully expecting to learn there's lessons today.
Your answer, the first answer, really resonated with me in regards to the trust part of it and the expectation. Obviously, we or all of us on this call have lived the life of a service person. So whether that's, and it is a life, it's not a job. So, and everyone has a standardization, a benchmark, how you talk to people, how you walk, and everything like that. And then when I got out, I realized that Civvy Street isn't like that at all. So, like, there's no standardization, no benchmark, and it was very difficult for me to. Work ethic was one for me. Very difficult to. I could see people. I think they were being lazy, but they weren't. They were working at their 100%, but it wasn't at the baseline 100% that I was used to. So yeah, I did find that quite difficult. So yeah, that resonated with me a little bit there. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that sort of stuck out as well, you talk about. Sorry, 2 seconds.
There's poop on the grass.
Okay, thanks. There's poop on the grass, by the way, but I'll get to that in a second.
Yes,
Out you go, please. Wayne will probably keep that in, which is great.
That's staying in.
That's got to be in. Poop. There's poop on the grass.
There's poop on the grass, Daddy. Yeah. One of the things I was going to say, when you said there about you've got to manage money and cash flow, but I imagine that was really difficult, because this is your pride and joy. This is something that heart, soul, you've invested money into it, and you want it to be a success. So if the branding and the label is going to cost 50% more than the basic label to make it look better, you might go, well, I'm just going to do it because I want it to look better, even though that's not going to increase the profit. Do you know what I mean? It must be a real difficult challenge versus head over heart when it comes to creating a brand.
It is, and to be brutally honest, at the outset, I was very naive about that, Matt, and I wasn't thinking figures. I was thinking exactly what you've just described. The brand needs to be, and I said when we started the project, I said, right, fellas, the two bywords are understated excellence. That's what the Royal Marines refer to. It's a sort of unwritten rule, if you like. And I said, that's what we're looking for in everything we do with this project. So whether it be the design, shape of the bottle, the juice that goes with, all of it's got to hang together. And yeah, you get carried away. And this is where I also worked for a venture capital in startup world. And you'll find exactly this in the business side. Owners of startups are driven because they've got this brilliant concept and idea. And sometimes they forget the money side of things and they get run away with their own good idea. And I'm not blaming them. I absolutely totally understand it now. So it's definitely a learning curve there.
One of the things as well with regards to, I mean, Commando Spirit for me as a consumer, saw it on social media. My wife saw it. She bought me a bottle because I collect whiskey and loved it. But it's you're pivoting and branching out all of the time. You've got chin strapped gin now. Was gin always going to become with it, or was it a question of I've done whiskey for me, and now I need gin as a nicer complement for it?
Okay, this is true honesty. If I knew what I now know, I would not have started with whiskey. Okay, gin is by now I understand why the gin market is so full of thousands of different gins now. Gin is much quicker and easier to produce as a product. All right, and then rum, and then whiskey. That's probably the order I would have done it in. Okay, but the story of Commando Spirit obviously is Scotland. That's the new labels you've probably seen. We have 1940, Achnacarry and Loch Island. Those were the two places where the original commandos were trained in the Highlands of Scotland and started in 1940. And yes, they were not Royal Marines before you army boys try and tell me otherwise. Okay, so it was. No, my original concept was to do the whiskey because the story starts in Scotland. And many people have now told me about branding and marketing is all about building a story. You know, how does your product stand out against anybody else's? Well, it's around that story. It's about the brand. So actually, whilst I wouldn't necessarily change it, I may well have launched gin at the same time I was doing, because the gin is much quicker and easier to produce, and therefore your cash flow is better. Whereas whiskey is more complicated. Whiskey takes a long time. Okay, minimum is 3 years for Scotch, and it had to be Scotch. Okay, before even a distillery can release whiskey, it's got to be 3 years. So that's a minimum. And as you well know, as whiskey drinkers, most of the whiskies you will drink are 5, 7 years are young. Otherwise, it's 10, 15, 20 odd years old. So I hadn't originally put the gin, and the gin's a good story in its own right, actually, and I think I should tell it here because it's a fellow veteran. I was on a call with a company that I do some work with, mainly ex-veterans. A lady down the other end who had served in Afghanistan with us, who's now the chief of staff of this team. She said, "Rory, you ever come across Scotland gin?" I went, "No, why?" She said, "Well, they live up near you." I live in North Devon. Anyway, he lives near Dartmoor. Anyway, he's an ex-army chap who I think he was Army Air Corps and then transferred to the PT Corps. A guy called Mark Rees. Anyway, he set up a small holding. I think it's about 30 acres. He has Gotland sheep. That's why his gin is called Gotland Gin. I looked at his website, loved his story. Again, he and his wife are both military or ex-military. Rang him and said, "Look, I've got this brand called Commando Spirit. Haven't done a gin yet. Should we do it?" And then I went down to see his distillery, and lo and behold, literally I look out over his fields and there's Dartmoor right there overlooking him. And I went, "Mate, that's where the modern day commandos do their greenberry test. That's the final bit, the 30 miler." So the story starts coming together, and then the name for the gin had to be slightly different because I wanted the Commando Spirit was going to stay as Scotch. What are we going to call it? Still going to be Commando Spirit as a label or a brand. And then I put 4 different names out on a LinkedIn poll, and Chinstrap came out as number 1.
I think the thing with chin strapped over the Commando Spirit is a unique. A lot of people relate it to being in the Marines or Commando, whereas chin strapped, anyone who served at some point has 100% been chin strapped.
But it was interesting, though. I did test it across non-military people as well. Because, again, Commando Spirit says what it is on the tin sort of thing. So non-military people get that. But I thought chin strapped, I was like, "Ooh, is that a little bit too, too slangy?" And actually, my kids both looked at me and said, No, I think I get that, Dad. Chin straps. You're on your chin strap, aren't you? You know, it is a phrase that actually more people realise. It is you're absolutely right, Matt. It's a very military sort of phraseology, and that's where it originates. But actually, a lot of people do get it. So I've been lucky in that one. It's
I
also
guess
CSG again. Remember?
I guess some things are just meant to be, aren't they? You know, the
Yeah,
fact that you found a fellow veteran who made gin, the fact that it's in Dartmoor, the fact that where the
yeah.
whiskey is where the Commando course started to where it is now. I think that's like you
Hey,
said, it's a lot of story.
even the hip flasks on our website, you'll see we do a little hip flask.
Yeah,
That's another veteran who literally left. He approached me, said, I've bought this laser carve system. Anything I could do for you? And I said, well, I've actually got another guy who does all the bottle garment. I said, well, what about hip flasks? So he does my hip flask for me. So again, it's all veteran based, pretty much.
that's incredible. It really is. It's incredible, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy is the veteran community. I'm a huge supporter of veterans. Some of the guests we've had most of the guests we've had on the podcast, I've interacted with on as a consumer as well as serving with. And I think that's part of the joy of it. I've got a question before we look at like the sort of the final-ish part of the pod is what's the goal of Commando Spirit? Is it to have it on the shelves in Morrison's and Sainsbury's all over the country, or is it to just can be a really strong brand associated with the military?
I think it's more the latter than the former, to be brutally honest with you. But like any of these things, you never. I mean, I love, Hey, I was a J5 plans guy. Set your goal, set the outcome. What's the end state? Civvy life ain't quite as right. We're on a journey, and where the path takes us, I don't quite know. Hey, my dream would actually to be own my own distillery, but I'm not a multi-millionaire. I don't think I'm probably going to achieve that in the years that I've got left in it. But who knows? Matt, somebody might come along and we set up a distillery, and I know where it's going to be and what it'll be. Yeah, I'm not going to divulge that necessarily here. Um, I think the bit, in all honesty, I need to, the charitable piece is what I'm doing. This is as much about giving money back to the system. All right. Now, primarily it's through the Royal Marines Association, but it's not solely. I help all sorts of people. They approach me and, Wounded Warriors. I remember there was one bottle of Commando Spirit whiskey was sold at a lunch that was in aid of Wounded Warriors. £800 somebody paid for a bottle. One of the guys was an ex-paratrooper. The other guy was a submariner. You wouldn't
Yeah.
have thought they would buy for 800 quid a bottle of Commando Spirit, but they did. So this, I'm not saying that I've necessarily achieved the aim already, but in the first 2 years, broad figures through direct and indirect, we probably raised about 10 grand for various charities. Again, mostly it's going to the Royal Marine charity, as you would imagine, because I worked 37 years. But that, to me, is the measurement of success at the moment. I'm not making money out of this. I'll be brutally honest with you. That if the charity does, then that's good. I don't want to. I want to make money at some point, hopefully, but where the journey is going, Matt, I really don't know. I've got obviously the gin there. I'm redoing the whiskey as we speak. That's why the background you've got here, which will be a subtle hint to your viewers. I'm also, I'll flag here. Yes, I'm interested in rum. Rum builds on the story. I've got a lot of people who say to me they love Commando Spirit as a concept, but they don't drink whiskey. So gin was the first offering. A lot of them are going, I really would like a rum. So yeah, I'm talking to a handful of people at the moment about rum. Reality is it won't be out this year, mate. Quite when I get to that is another thing, but rum is on the card, if you like. And you heard it here first.
Fantastic. We like to come to the end of the pod now. We like to wrap up with like an elevator pitch. So this is the time where we go, why Commando Spirit, and your chance to product placement, as we can see. Why? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I've sort of covered it all in the previous
yeah,
30 minutes that we've been chatting, and I think the charitable piece is definitely a significant one for me. My career, sadly, we've lost a lot of blokes. and a few still around. So to me, that's odd. Why Commando Spirit? Well, hey, says it on the tin, really. But it's also genuinely, it's about engaging people and saying, enjoy this, share it. And this is, again, you guys will get this bit, but it's, to me, whiskey is sitting down with some fellas, with your mates, male, female, whatever they happen to be, and sharing something is a really important part and parcel. And particularly, post service, a lot of people, they need that moment. They just need to sit down and share, whether it be a cup of coffee or it's a whiskey. I don't really mind, but that's part and parcel of the Commando Spirit story, is actually about that sharing. It's the commemorative piece. It brings the story to the modern man and woman, but it is very much engaging with another. Well, I suppose you do sit. I am sad enough to sit and drink a whiskey on my own, but the reality is I enjoy it more sharing it with another. So that, I think, is probably summarise it as good as I can.
I think that's an excellent summary, and I think it's an excellent. Like Paul and I will relate to that with regards to whiskey, because we collect whiskey, but we drink whiskey.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you have a bottle that you don't open.
Yeah.
Whereas some people will collect whiskey for the sake of having whiskey. It's a very expensive first edition. What does it taste like? Absolutely no idea. It's in the box. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'm the same. When I get a whiskey, I like to open it. I like to share it. I always have mine just with ice. Don't judge me, but
No.
I just like it. I like it with ice. I know some people like to just raw dog it with nothing. Big fan of it with ice. I think it changes the complexity a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I love a single malt. I love sharing a single malt. I too am in the sad. Will quite happily have a single malt on my own. Do you know what I mean? Just for an occasion. But yeah, long may the whiskey revival live on.
Well, who knows? There's some good English distilleries now open, so we're talking to them as well. In fact, I literally just got an email from a guy in Yorkshire who's opened a distillery. Again, this is part of the fun of being in this business: is people now see the brand and come want to talk to us.
Paul and I are from North Wales, and as I say, Wales itself has Pandarian, but recently North Wales has Aberfoils, and Aberfoils is a fantastic whiskey, and it's developing all of the time. And what they did to fund the future of the whiskey was make gin, and now the gin is enormous and really nice. So it's a unique story that you can get whiskey from all of the isles across the UK. I think it's mega.
No, it's definitely, and English whiskey is its own definition now, and rights. They've got the guild and all the rest of it around it. So I don't know whether I'll end up doing an English whiskey. Actually, my family's originally from Ireland. My father was Irish, so again, I probably want to do an Irish one. I've got the Scotch, maybe some Irish, an English, and a Welsh. Why not?
Yeah,
Just do
why
it
not?
all.
Why not? Listen, Rory, we will keep you no longer. We understand you're a very, very busy man. Thank you so much for giving us the time on the pod. It's a unique story. It's an incredible story, and it's nice to be a very small part of that. We bought the whiskey. Helen bought me the whiskey sort of probably 2.5 years ago. To have the whiskey at the beginning and to see where that grows it's pretty cool to be part of, even if it's a tiny part.
Yes, mate, I'm very impressed that you've purchased some whiskey, which is great. You need to buy the gin now, because the gin is actually very, very good.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rory. All of the best, my friend.
Appreciate it, mate.
Cheers, fellas. Thanks very much for everything.